Hello everyone and welcome back to season 2 of the PGN Podcast. This podcast has one simple message: to normalise the conversation on resilience, our environment and our future in a climate changed world, with our communities at the heart of it all. Our primary goal is to foster discussions about flooding, climate resilience and related environmental issues to better support communities. We're here to take a deeper dive into the conversations we began in season 1. We will be connecting hearts and minds, ambition, passion alongside our community and experts. Together we'll work towards building a more resilient future in our ever-changing world. I am Meshi Taka, the project lead for Project Groundwater in Northumbria, which is what PGN stands for, and your host for this season. Let's jump right in. Today we'll be exploring sustainable drainage systems, SuDS. We're joined by the fantastic James Hitching. Hi James.
Hi
welcome.
Meshi, you're right.
Tell us a bit about you and your background, James.
Yeah, so I've been involved with flood risk management for, I think 18 years now. So I started off after leaving university, I went to the Environment Agency. I worked there for about 6 years, involved with sort of all things sort of flooding really, getting involved a number of different departments, and then eventually working my way into what was the development and flood risk team there. And then following that, I moved to Northumberland County Council and headed up their planning department in terms of responding to flood risk applications. So I was there for 10 plus years doing that. And then after that, I decided to go independent and set up my own flood risk consultancy. And from there, so it's been a sort of a bit of a whirlwind time, still involved back with local councils, get involved with their flood risk applications, making sure they're compliant and everything, and then sort of delving into other things, so helping out consultants, making sure their schemes will be compliant for councils, looking at sort of flood risk investigations, so a whole range of different things really.
You were there though when the Flood and Water Management Act basically...
Indeed.
So
absolutely.
I guess you were the first crew out there setting up the teams and trying to set up the processes for the lead local flood authorities. Just before we kind of get stuck into the SuDS, could you explain to some of our viewers what the lead local flood authority is and what their role is under that particular regulation?
Yes, like you say, so lead local flood authorities were set up as part of the Flood and Water Management Act back in 2010. So they are sort of either your unitary authorities or your county councils. So up in the northeast, they are pretty much all unitary authorities, but other areas you do get sort of more smaller councils sort of get engulfed, and they become, the lead local flood authority is the larger county council, and they have a range of different functions. So it's from looking at sort of flood drainage consents, so looking at sort of putting structures in watercourses. It's investigating flooding. So if a certain flood event occurs, it's responsibility of the LLFA to go out and investigate the flooding and to speak to different risk management authorities to make sure, and to see ways how the flooding stops and happens again. It's setting up new schemes. So if a flood occurs, it's to sort of provide a scheme to stop it happening again. And one of the key functions is to be a consultee within the planning process. So it's for major planning applications. So there's applications for 10 houses or more, or over sort of 1 hectare or sort of 0.1 hectares in terms of floor space. And as part of a planning application, a flood risk assessment and drainage strategy needs to be undertaken. That gets submitted to the planning authority, and then the planning authority submit that to the LLFA, and it's the LLFA's responsibility as that statutory consultee to review that assessment and to make sure it is compliant, and then ultimately go back to the planners and say, yes, this is fine with a number of conditions, or no, you need to go back and ask a number of questions to make sure that the development itself won't flood, or it won't increase flood risk elsewhere.
Yeah, and that could also involve recommending SuDS.
Absolutely, yes. And I think that's a key thing really with these planning applications that come forward now is, I'm sure we might go into a bit more in terms of guidance and things like that. But yeah, so when you get a new application come forward, it's set out that you do need to include SuDS within the new development. And so a part of that role, part of that process is making sure that SuDS are implemented within there and we get the right suds as well. So I think that's a key component of it.
That's one of the reasons why it was something you were part of, that the LLFA in the Northeast came up with a kind of consistent, centralized document that gave advice on how to implement SuDS with regards to the drainage strategy and the drainage design, and obviously flood resilience, wasn't it?
It is, yeah. So as part of, the government, when they released, sort of, you've got your planning guidance out there, and then you've got your sort of secondary document as part of that. And in addition to that as well, they released what was the non-statutory standard for sustainable drainage systems. And the problem with that guidance was that it told you what to do, but it didn't tell you how to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So myself and the sort of 7 Northeast authorities, we got together and we tried to sort of formalise a bunch of standards based on those national ones to say, here are the standards, and this is exactly what we want to see across the Northeast. And it was just to promote that consistency across the Northeast, because I sometimes do have sympathy for developers. And when you're looking to develop a scheme in Northumberland, but you're also looking to develop a scheme, say, in Durham, it should be exactly the same. We shouldn't be asking for different things. So that Northeast document does sort of look at all of those standards and create those local ones. And like I say, it promotes that consistency and makes sure we do get the right SuDS across the board.
Obviously, I was a consultant in that space, so we've tested that a few times. But it was everything from infiltration testing with regards to the type of SuDS and its construction, and even down to modelling type of outputs that you provide to justify your design. So it's quite a comprehensive document. We know what SuDS are, but how do you go about building the right SuDS which are fit for purpose in the environment?
Exactly. That's it. Yeah. So it's all well and good saying we want SuDS in there. It's how do we get the right SuDS? How do we make sure they are built, and they're going to be built so they will perform the functions that they are designed to do? So it's all well and good to say we want a SuDS pond in there, but you build a pond and it's just an end of system one, water goes in, water comes up, water goes out. It doesn't necessarily provide all those functions that's good SuDS need and should do. And that's where we hope the local standards do provide a bit of clarity and also refers to guidance. There's a lot of guidance out there. And so the idea wasn't to sort of create new things, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel in that sense. So there was maybe a little bit of signposting to these other documents that are out there and which are considered to be best practice. So the guidance for Northeast standards do that. And hopefully it's been a success in terms of when we did do that, and sort of several meetings between all 7 of us, just to make sure we had that consistency across the board. And I think it has been sort of well received across the country. I was involved with a national organisation called ASA, the Association of SuDS Authorities, which was an organisation sort of across all 192 different LLFAs, I think, across England. We tried to get as many on board as we could, and the idea again was to promote that consistency, but across the country. And I think a lot of them did look at the Northeast standards and try to sort of use that across their local areas and to get their own individual standards.
I mean, it's good to hear that it's become a bit of an exemplar template.
I hope so. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been a few years since we did it, and I think things have progressed in some ways. So yeah, it is good. It is good to hear that it has been sort of looked at and referred to by other people in the industry.
So kind of going back to your point about the function, what SuDS are designed for, and the ability to deliver those multi-functions. For those who are listening, who are curious about SuDS, and they've probably just heard about it in high-level terms or relating mostly to ponds, can you just take us through the different types, and where we talk about functionality, what those functionalities can be?
Yeah, certainly. So I think I'll maybe just step back to basics first of all. So you have a greenfield land, it rains, water comes down, you will get some runoff, maybe about 10%, but the other 90% will sort of infiltrate into the ground, and that water will recharge groundwater, and or it will go through a sort of process like through flow back into rivers. And that's the process that we're trying to replicate as part of SuDS.
So recharge, again, top up is all we're saying.
Yes,
so it kind of tops up our natural resources.
Exactly.
Groundwater. Right?
Yeah. Keep it on point and
I know.
everything for the podcast.
I think that's the thing where we talk about this a lot in the space we work in, and recharge is such a lovely word, but unless we explain what it is, a lot of people can assume that it's something that
Of course. So those are like the baseline conditions of what natural processes are. Yeah. SuDS look to mimic those natural processes. So when development is built, if you take sort of a standard sort of, I don't know, just say like a 10-house development, so you've got 10 houses, you've got roads, you've got driveways, a conventional system would just see all of the water from the roofs, from the roads, go into sewers. And historically, that would also be the foul water, so your water from your washing machines and from your toilets, that would all go into one sewer, and then that would then go into rivers. And we've seen recently in the news all about the CSOs and the problems with water quality in our rivers. More recently, the water has been separated, so the foul does go into the foul water system, but the surface water goes into another. The problem is there's nothing slowing that water down, so all the water from the roofs and from the roads just goes into the pipes and just goes out at a rate, at speed, exactly, and at a bad quality. There's nothing there to intercept, all the water, particularly from the roads, that comes into the system and goes off. So you've got your baseline, you've got what's currently there. So this is where SuDS comes into the middle of it to try to get that mimicking process going. So SuDS are a range of different techniques that can be used. So you've got your what I call sort of source control ones. So this is to look at capturing water at source as much as possible. So you've got green roofs, for example. So putting green roofs on top of buildings. You've got permeable paving. So these are ideal for sort of roads and for driveways. You've got features like infiltration systems, which are relevant in some areas, but not in others. And then you've got systems like swales. So the swale is effectively an open ditch, but it serves many functions in terms of water storage, but also water quality cleansing as well. And those functions then go into your larger features like an attenuation basin, which is a dry grass basin, which can be used for multiple functions. And then you've got ponds, which again sort of serve for that sort of process. So SuDS are a range of different techniques. I won't list them all. We don't have all day and everything.
Well, you're doing well.
So
what else is going to say?
Yeah. So, but I think those are the headline ones. Really, there's a like I say, there's a plethora of different functions out there, but those are the main ones. And by utilising those techniques, that then looks to mimic those natural processes. So by introducing those ones there, we are starting to get water back into the system, and we aren't just storing it all and putting it back at speed. So that's the idea of SuDS in that sense.
The driver for that though is just creating a slower pace for better response. So at speed, if you have all that flow hitting the system at the same time, you're more likely to overwhelm the system. But if you slow it down, then it has a chance to kind of make its way in a more kind of timely fashion, and it creates that water cycle effect, which is what you're referring to, the mimicking what the water cycle would do naturally had we not changed everything.
Exactly that. Yeah. Putting it sort of as simply as that is the idea of what we are trying to achieve, certainly from our water quantity perspective. SuDS, we've got 4 pillars of SuDS. So water quantity, water quality, amenity, and biodiversity. So with those 4 pillars, very much we do focus on the water quantity side of things because it stops flood risk, occurring on site and off site. And I think that is its primary function in terms of SuDS. But I certainly think the other 3 pillars, shouldn't be neglected in any way. Certainly like the water quality side of things as well. They do have a really good function in terms of, sort of cleansing that water. We do have issues, with water quality in our rivers, and SuDS is a great tool technique to be able to help that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of conversation at the moment on the quality of surface water runoff, and I guess water companies have been at the forefront of that.
Been in the news,
a bigger conversation is around again, surface water runoff comes from the surface before it enters any of our systems, and is recognizing that some of the waste and pollutants that we have on our surfaces, you may not necessarily see it, but it's there.
Yeah.
And that's what the ecosystems respond to.
Yes.
And it's just helping our audiences understand when we talk about water quality, how exactly can a sod help with water quality? For example, a swale, a vegetated swale, or a basin or a pond. How do they do that?
Yes.
Just to help them visualize what we're talking about.
No, of course. So water will come into a swale, and from the time it enters a swale and exits a swale, that water needs to get from A to B. But because there's some vegetation in the swale, when that water comes through, it gives it the time for the nasties in that water to be able to sort of settle, and sort of the water can then infiltrate into the ground, and those nasties will sort of be there, and then the natural processes will just break down those pollutants. And so what happens is, for more sort of trafficked roads where you get sort of lots of heavy vehicles on there, you might get more sort of salt gritters, for example, things like that. You maybe need two sort of processes. So for management trains, so you need sort of 2 stages of treatment. So you've got your swale, which will do the trick, but it won't break down all of those components. So then you need your swale, and then that will then go into a larger feature such as an attenuation basin, which works the same way essentially as a swale, but just over a much larger area. And you've got a pond, which, because it's got permanent water in there, you've got like reeds, which sort of do very well in breaking down those pollutants.
It mimics quite an industrial process when you look at treatment, the kind of primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment, where the first stage is all the large solids, so that drops out of the bottom. The second stage is the finer stuff, and then the third stage was the chemical stuff, where you break it down. But it's the sedimentation and the physical filter systems that these sods provide. And you talk about wetlands as well. And I think I've designed a couple of these in the past for different environments, so residential estates, schools. And one of the challenges you tend to have when it comes to sods is everyone likes the idea of them, but it's the concern around maintenance, permeable driveways, for example. I feel they're a really strong option for domestic residents. But then there is this perception of maintenance, sods, ponds and basins in schools, the perception of health and safety risks. So what are some of the tips you can give to people considering but just worried about taking care of them long term?
Yeah, certainly. I think, so like you said, if you break it down sort of into your homeowner sort of components. So sods within homes, like you say, you probably would get something very simple, maybe like as a water butt. For example, a water butt, is classed as a sod. It sort of stores water, it slows it down. So those components there, very simple to install and very simple to maintain as well. Things like permeable paving, which I think are great. Yes, it does require a bit of maintenance, but nothing too much. It requires sort of a yearly brush of the surface just to make sure all the fines are sort of cleared out of the gaps in between the blocks. And then it needs just a bit, maybe every sort of 5-10 years, a bit more of a deeper clean, but probably no more so than just like a regular drive that you might have, where you sort of have to get the jet washer out to clean it. So really, it's nothing sort of too more erroneous than for a regular sort of drive in that sense. And I think a lot of these things is about education as well. It's not as bad as what people think. Oh no, I've got a permeable drive. What have I got to do to maintain it? It isn't that difficult to do so. And I think that's the main thing, is just an education perspective. And like you said about sods in schools, I think this is always a bit of a bugbear of mine in terms of health and safety. I mean, I used to get this all the time when I was in the council, and I was sort of sitting on planning committees, and I'd get councillors sort of always, the health and safety aspect would always come up there and sort of say, oh, we can't do this, you can't put open water here, we've got school kids sort of walking past it, etc., etc. Kids aren't stupid, they you walk past these sort of features all the time. You've got major rivers that aren't fenced off and things like that. Again, it's just about education and things like that. If you explain to children what these features are and what they do, they will stay away from them. A little bit of like toddler-proof fencing, something like that, just to denote where the feature is enough. Just to make sure it's okay. And then the maintenance side of things, it's no difference to anything else. So maintenance of a pond, just do like regular sort of grass cuts and sort of trim back the vegetation in there. And then again, every sort of 5-10 years, maybe 20, just do like a big de-silt really, just to sort of make sure just to scrape out all the silt that's accumulated in there. Ponds in schools, serve such a great feature for children to learn.
Exactly. The learning there is amazing. You're learning about ecosystems and wildlife and also about the environment. Yeah. And yes, there's a science behind it, but it just brings such a rounded opportunity really for early learning and inquisitive brains and minds.
Exactly. That's it. Yeah. And you don't have to put 6 feet fencing around it, to make it safe and things like that,
Well, you say that though, but I remember one particular project, we did have to put fencing around it. But
blame the LLFA.
I will say that things have moved forward since then.
Yeah,
but
of course. There's a time and place for everything and things like that. But I don't think that needs to be the sort of the prerequisite in terms of designing these things is to put those heavy fencing around it.
And I think the learning around SuDS, the accessibility point of view, there's a big conversation around affordability as well. And I know I was telling you about the TikTok I saw about this lady who took a massive kind of like, I think it was a clay, like a vase of some sort, and she did a chain link and then she drilled a hole and put a tap in it. And that was a water butt. So there's a kind of circular economy conversation there where she didn't have to go buy a water butt. She just made her own. Yeah. And we do love DIY in this country. So I thought that was amazing. I've put it on my list. I'm going to try and do it. I don't know how successful I will be, but I'll give it a go. But there's a conversation around affordability, particularly post-COVID. We value our outside spaces. I think I read somewhere that after COVID, demand for houses with gardens skyrocketed. And I think recently with the Chelsea Flower Show, we saw that amazing flood resilient garden, which I loved it. I thought, well, fantastic. But then I thought, well, who's going to build that in their garden? So what are your views around how we can make some of these ideas scalable, looking at the way the fashion world works, where you have New York Fashion Week or something, and there's this concept design that everyone's fawning over, but then over this next season, you see versions of that come out, which are for the masses essentially. And I feel like there's a gap between what we're selling here, developers and people obviously can plan with specialists, to what somebody who has a lovely home and want to do their little bit towards it can do. So there's a gap between that and most people that perhaps don't want to buy a brand new house. They just want to improve their own home. Yeah. So how can we bridge that gap?
Yeah. Well, don't ask me questions about fashion first and foremost. It's not my forte at all, as you can tell. But I did see the Chelsea Flower Show, Flood Resilience Garden, and I thought it was good. I thought it was good in the sense that it is bringing flood risk mainstream. So I certainly think it's got benefits in that sense. So people who don't normally talk about flooding, it brings it to their attention. So I certainly think it was good from that perspective. Yeah. But like you say, scalability, the size of that garden and the amount of money it was going to cost to do that.
And the transportation and the logistics of that garden.
I know. And, I don't know what your garden's like, but I certainly couldn't fit anything like that in mine. That's for sure. So like you say, it's all about scalability, and your analogy with the Fashion Week is relevant in that sense. And I think there are things you can do. Even by putting in water butts is a part of that. So where maybe you weren't not necessarily storing the water on the surface, you are still storing that water and putting it away. So I think that's a small bit that can be done. And then it's creating sort of rain gardens, which you can do in a smaller space. So you can sort of build a small depression in the garden itself, and then have an overflow pipe which comes up. So when the water gets to a certain level, it reaches that pipe, and then the water then gets back into the system. So you are storing that water in there. And I think this is where sort of SuDS and nature-based solutions sort of, there's certainly, there can be sort of interlinked and there's a crossover and things like that. But this is where nature-based solutions, so utilising plants which have a very good sort of take-up of water, for example, those types of features can be used in gardens, where the drainage is necessarily poor. You've got features like that can be used and they can be integrated within the garden design. So I think you've got things like that, sort of rainwater planters. So you've got these raised planters, which you probably see normally, but again, you can disconnect the drain pipe from your house, goes into the planter. Again, the water comes up, feeds the planter itself, and then it gets to a certain level, and then it goes back into the system.
That's what I would like to see more of. I have a little bit in my kind of driveway, and I say it's a wild garden. Mostly, I can't be bothered to cut it, so I'm letting it grow wild. But ideally, I want it to be a wild garden, and I think even as somebody who technically I can design all the SuDS you want me to design. Yeah. But when it comes to my own home, there's a little bit of like,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Then there is this massive, I just think there's something missing. And what you're describing there, if the resources were there to link up what a lot of people call, I don't know, passion gardening, and saying actually that passion can be transformed into an effective system to support water recirculation, and it gives you flood resilient benefits as well as all the amenities, and you can create a little ecosystem.
Absolutely,
I just feel like that could be the next step to the flood resilient garden. And that's what I mean about the kind of conversion. So you have the fashion week of gardens, right? Great. It creates a platform. People pay attention. They think, ooh, but what we're missing is that translation. It's the kind of smaller, achievable models
exactly,
of how you can take elements of that and put it in your home as well. And I felt strongly that was what was missing for me.
It's
looking at that.
It's getting from A to B, isn't it? And maybe it's education. Maybe we need to get onto Alan Titchmarsh to do a program, sort of how to design your garden from a flood resilience perspective. Is maybe what we need to do.
It's a call out to Alan Titchmarsh.
Yeah, it is. Alan, if you're listening.
No, but you touched on something else. This weird subcategory or distinction between SuDS and nature-based solutions, because it's something else we talked about. While I understand that SuDS can go into non-nature solutions, but it's still mimicking nature systems.
Exactly.
Why do you think those two tend to be mentioned in different categories?
It's a good question, and I don't quite know the answer to it. In all fairness, I think maybe people see nature-based solutions as a mechanism to resolve flooding. So if you've got existing flooding, people maybe see nature-based solutions as a mechanism to stop that flooding from occurring, whereas SuDS maybe is looking at it from a perspective of flooding isn't necessarily occurring at the moment, and SuDS are there to make sure the situation doesn't get any worse, or certainly looks to mimic what is currently a lower baseline. It's an interesting question, and maybe it's something which needs to be a bit of thought. I don't know if there's much sort of out there in terms of...
Is it a branding thing?
Possibly maybe it's something
SuDS was
simple
a
as
brand
that.
long before nature-based solution was.
Exactly.
Because when I think about it, they're all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to mimic how nature would behave.
Yes.
I don't know if there's any requirement for it. I mean, I guess nature-based solution insists that you're using nature, but I can't see a major distinction.
No. I mean, I don't
and
know.
they interact and really
they're very similar
with each other.
They're very similar. Yeah, I think they are so interlinkable and everything like that.
Yeah,
it's maybe certain things, I don't know, like nature-based solutions. I maybe think of, you've got a water course and you put it in like a leaky dam, something like that, and those types of solutions, which I think would maybe fit more within the nature-based solutions sort of categorization than SuDS. But I think the two could be, used. And I think if you talk about it and you sort of reference it as SuDS or you reference it as nature-based solutions, I don't think anyone would really batter an eyelid. I don't think anybody is going to call you up and sort of say, no, that's nature-based solutions and stuff like that. I don't think they would. You might get one or two, but
And just before we close out, just finally, again, we've talked about scalability and accessibility. So as somebody who's watching this podcast today, and you were going to give them some advice to take away, perhaps they want to look into SuDS or implementing SuDS at home, or I don't know, schools, what advice on guidelines and steps would you give them?
Well, certainly I think SuDS is it's here to stay, first and foremost, and there are a load of guidance out there. I mean, certainly I would sort of signpost people to the Syria SuDS manual. I think that's basically the Bible in terms of looking at different types of SuDS features, maintenance requirements, exactly how they should be built and everything like that. So that's certainly the document that I would point
it's
people
free
to.
as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's certainly the document I would point people to first and foremost, and everything's in there. I still refer to it on a regular basis and stuff like that. So that's certainly the document I would go to. And I mean, I'm a big advocate for SuDS in schools as well, and that's certainly something that I would like to see more of. I think going forward is to see, to get these different SuDS features in schools, because I think education is so important in that sense. And if we can get school children to know about these features, to what are they, what do they do, that then going forward as they progress into life will hopefully then make them want to do things themselves. So make them want to install water butts, make them do permeable paving, and then maybe going forward to create some sort of form of rain garden within their system, and even then look more with a more of a community perspective as well. So if there is like a local flood issue within the community, you could do little things. So like on the highway, create little rain gardens within the roads to slow that water down and do all the water treatment. So that's, I think that would be my takeaway really, is to hopefully progress that further.
Are there any organisations out there where you can go for free advice or just general advice on SuDS?
Well, Syria is certainly the best one for that, and they've got like a sister website called UK SuDS, which is a really good website there. It's got some great case studies on there. So that's certainly the first and foremost one, which I would refer people to for looking at SuDS.
That's the big one for you.
That's the big one for me. Yeah. That's the main one. I mean, certainly there's so much information out there, to be fair, but that certainly would be my starting point for sure. To go there, and then I'm sure on the UK SuDS website it's got links to other documents from there. So I certainly would sort of signpost people to those first two documents and websites first and foremost, and then from there they can then branch off and sort of go down different rabbit holes and everything like that afterwards.
What's different about SuDS now that perhaps wasn't around 10 years ago is it's a bit more mainstream, and it has to do with I'll reference Severn Trent's project, the Mansfield SuDS project, for example. Probably usually most large-scale projects tend to have an element of SuDS.
Yes.
This is an entire investment, £76 million on SuDS as a flood alleviation solution, but also with the surface water separation, the benefits you're talking about there. So I do feel with that type of project having the impact that visible impact that it's having at the moment, there's a lot of training, a lot of lectures, engagement, which I've been following, and I find it really fascinating. Maybe that would help raise the interest. I think
it has to. I think it has to. Like I say, something like that, such a large scheme which has all those multi-benefits, I think can only be beneficial in all fairness. And again, if something like that, if that can start to go mainstream, so start to go on national news and engage in people's interests that way, and then again from an education perspective, if things like that can start to be used within the curriculum and things like that as an example, then again I think that's going to be so beneficial.
Perhaps we need to think about having more of those learning resources, free resources as well.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's an area we need to consider, maybe with whenever Schedule 3 lands. that might be something
might be the catalyst,
with a SuDS approval body. Maybe that's something that could be provided. But
I think so, like you say, whenever it does come forward and everything like that,
we're all waiting.
Well, exactly. Don't hold me to anything. But when it does, everyone's going to be, well, everyone within the industry is going to be wanting to know information, want information. So as much information out there that people can get for free again, it's going to be beneficial, and it's going to help everybody out in the long run to get information out there.
So for me, it's not to leave our communities behind. And I think one of the things this podcast is about community empowerment. And all that knowledge, we need to make it accessible to our communities as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's it. Yeah. And again, I think it's from a local community perspective. If you've got a local flooding problem, how can we engage them to resolve the issue? And SuDS is a major component in doing that. And by educating people to make them aware of what are these features, how do they work, and basically to make them own it themselves. So
at source,
exactly. Yeah. So all these features, you can make them really pretty, put nice plants in there, nice flowers, and they can maintain them themselves as part of their own sort of community, as part of their own parish. And I think, and a lot of the time when these things are installed, people don't realise what they are first and foremost and stuff like that. So I think, you can certainly design them to make them sort of blend in to the natural surroundings. And then just, by putting some sort of signs up to educate people as to, this is what this is, this is what it does. And so I think, that SuDS can play a major role, in that sort of community engagement.
And it does bring curb appeals.
Oh, yeah.
So,
absolutely.
But I think we'll call it a day on that. Thank you so much, James. It's been
amazing.
No worries.
Thank you, Meshi. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
And thanks to our listeners for joining in today. For more information on the topics we covered, please refer to the episode notes for helpful links. Project Groundwater Northumbria is a research and innovation project funded by DEFRA as part of the £200 million Flood and Coastal Innovation Programmes, which is managed by the Environment Agency. The programmes will drive innovation in flood and coastal resilience and adaptation to a changing climate. This project is led by Gateshead Council with regional and national partners. With this funding, we are working on practical, innovative actions and knowledge sharing with our communities at the heart. For more information about PGN, please visit www.pgn.org.uk.